What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. The wild card is finally set. The Rams are going to be hosting the Vikings in the first round of the wild card playoffs. The Rams' regular season finale wrapped up yesterday with the last-second loss to the Seattle Seahawks due to a Jimmy G fourth down incompletion. Overall, pretty decent game. We're going to talk about that one and do a little bit of a preview on the Vikings before we jump into a deep dive later this week. But before we jump into anything, first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
I'm good. I know that from last week and my Twitter presence, I seem very pessimistic, but right now I feel really good about this team. I love the mentality of we respect all but fear none, and using that and going headfirst, ramming it into the playoffs. I'm really excited for what's to come.
I thought some of the comments on some of your pessimistic tweets were actually really funny. One was Dean is going to kill you when he sees this. One was you were pessimistic during the Super Bowl season, and look what happened. Comments. Look, it's fine. I understand. You understand both sides. It's a 10-7 team that has to host a 14-3 team, and the only two teams that they lost to this season are the Lions and the Rams. So the Minnesota Vikings are pretty real. They got a really good head coach. The running attack is solid, even though Aaron Jones is banged up. You got red zone threats scattered across the board, but they weren't able to convert in the most important moments of yesterday's game. And I thought some of the play calling was suspect from Kevin O'Connell, who is a disciple of Sean McVay. So I think that the head-to-head matchup is going to be really interesting. But before we talk about the Vikings, I want to get into this game with the Seahawks because, you didn't have any Matthew Stafford. You had no Puka Nacua, no Cooper Kupp. Most of the starting offensive line was out outside of Steve Avila. Blake Corum broke his forearm, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season, which is a shame. You got some good stuff from Ronnie Rivers as a pass catcher out of the backfield, which is good. But I think the star of the show outside of Jimmy G was Jordan Whittington. And I want to talk about Jordan Whittington before we were Jordan Whittingham or Jordan Worthington, whatever they call him on the broadcast, because this is the guy that I feel like I was watching yesterday, and I was like, you know what? And I'm the biggest Cooper Kupp fan in the entire world. I have Cooper Kupp merchandise. We both do. We drink his coffee. But Jordan Whittington, in terms of the future of this organization, I feel like is going to be a very valuable asset, considering he was a late-round pick. He can play between the F and the Z, and he was also lined up outside in the X yesterday. He's a great out of the backfield. He's a great special teams player. This is from Josh at Joshino's Tweets. It says, Jordan Whittington led the league in yards after the catch yesterday with 72 in Week 18. In fact, the Rams had their best yards after the catch performance as a team this year in Week 18 with 232. A lot of that was due to the Jimmy Garoppolo screens and dump-offs and the offensive line being, backups for the majority. But it was the seventh best performance this season across the league. So I want to talk about the implementation of Jordan Whittington in the playoffs, because if he does play in rotation with Cooper Kupp, you got another really talented pass catcher and a guy that you could potentially rotate in the backfield too.
Yeah, Whittington is great. I saw Sosa, who's a great follow on Twitter, talk about how amazing Whittington is and slowly tiptoeing around the idea that, Cooper Kupp is kind of on the way out and Whittington kind of on the way in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just sad because Cooper, Triple Crown winner, Super Bowl MVP. He's done so much for this franchise, great recovery. But you see, you see sparks of young Kupp in Whittington, and it's really, it's how they do things. They draft low for these wide receivers, but they make impacts like they're top round draft picks. And yeah, I want to see him get involved more in this playoffs, honestly. And I think the only way really to do that is to take some snaps away from Kupp, which is sad when you're saying it.
Yeah, it definitely is. I would like to see a way if they can get all three receivers on the field at the same time in terms of Puka, Kupp, and also Jordan Whittington. Even like I mentioned, you could rotate Whittington in the backfield. But the one thing then you can't talk about like a head-to-head comparison with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp unless you talk about Cooper Kupp's intangibles, which are being able to educate other players on the team, being Coach Kupp, being, the workhorse early on in the morning, studying film, being a quarterback as a receiver. It's not a direct comparison yet, but Jordan Whittington, I feel like physically looks like he could be on his way to being that type of player. So I want to see implementation of him, and I want to see, Tutu Atwell had a couple of drops yesterday too, but being able to stretch the field with the combination of Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell, I feel like is going to be hugely important for this team to be able to create explosives in the playoffs, because that's where I feel like they're lacking. They're lacking explosives in the run game, and they're lacking explosives in the pass game. And, if you're going to be able to stay on top and get an early lead against a team that has 14 wins in your building, that would be a way to be able to do it. Because, Kyren, if he goes to a certain distance, has a 15-yard gain, 20-yard gain here and there, that's great. But to have explosives, it means that you can negate some of the extra plays that occur within a series. And that's when you make mistakes, when you have all these extra plays, when you have 12, 13, 14 play drives. So I just want to see more explosives and more creativity in the offense, which I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Higbee. I thought Higbee had a great game. He is, really a difference maker at tight end. We've been gushing about him since he's been coming back. The best tight end, seemingly, in Rams franchise history. He was great. I'm so happy that we have him in this playoff run, 100%. And, it's just such a shame that Corum, I feel like, was, the potential of him, we never really saw that reach its peak, and we're not going to this year. I love what we saw from Rivers, like you mentioned, but it just sucks that he goes out there and some fluke play breaks a forearm, and now, we end Nick's picks on a loss because he didn't get in the end zone. Yeah. But also, we don't have Corum for the playoffs, which is a much bigger issue than Nick's picks, which is
you're totally right. And we talked about explosives too. This is the Rams' explosive run plays. And the reason why this was brought up was because Cam Akers went for a 50-plus yard gain yesterday, which was the longest rushing play in the Vikings season last night. And it would have been the Rams' most explosive rushing play for this season as well. If I were to tell you between Aaron Jones, Kyren Williams, Blake Corum, and Cam Akers, who has the most explosive run this season amongst the four of them, probably the last guy that you would say would be Cam Akers. Right. So this is a visual.
I didn't know I thought it was rhetorical.
No, I'm sorry. No, so this is the Rams' most explosive runs of the season so far. So Kyron's longest run was 30 yards against Green Bay, 27 against Philly, 24 against the Vegas Raiders, and then a couple of 18, 17-yard runs scattered across the board. So, you want to see some explosivity. And you know what I thought was really interesting yesterday? We saw Jimmy G finish the day with 333 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Should have had 2 interceptions, only had 1. But something that we hope carries over in the playoffs is the utilization of the screen game. And that's where you can get Whittington involved. That's where you can get Puka involved. That's where you can get Kyren and Ronnie Rivers involved. And hats off to Mike LaFleur, because I thought he did a really nice job of calling some of the shots for the majority. And we talked about how Whittington and Higbee are kind of stock up right now. And then also on the other side of the ball, guys like Giff Smith deserve a ton of credit. I think Chris Shula does too. You had a lot of second-level, secondary defensive guys. Guys that don't play a lot, guys like Neville Gallimore, and I'm trying to think of a couple others. Backups for the majority. And you got some pretty decent things. You saw Emmanuel Forbes step up from a secondary perspective, covering DK Metcalf. You saw guys like Jalen McCullough still out there and Cameron Kinchins. But I think the game plan to be able to kind of shrink the pocket a little bit against Geno Smith, and the game plan to potentially shrink the pocket and collapse consistently against a guy like Sam Darnold, I think will be really important. And you saw it happen yesterday. And this is Sam Darnold in the red zone this season. First 15 games has a 75 QBR. Last 2 games, he has a 1 QBR. That's just the number 1 as his QBR over the last 2 games in the red zone. Completion percentage in the first 15 games, 70%. Last 2 games, 31%. And the off-target percentage is actually, it's a little bit higher than it was in the first 15 games. So to be able to do those things, you saw Chris Collinsworth call it out yesterday. So hats off to Giff Smith and Chris Shula being able to kind of bring that game plan together. And you need those things to be able to win a playoff game at home against a quarterback who doesn't play well when he escapes from the pocket.
Yeah, I mean, Darnold has been playing up until this point like an MVP quarterback, and he really probably his worst game on the biggest stage last night, which is a shame. But we were able to get pressure to him when we played him before. That does definitely feel like key. I know we don't blitz often, but I think bringing the blitz, Shula finding times to bring an extra man is going to be huge, because that's what they did over in Detroit. I forget the guy's name, Glenn something. He brought the blitz a lot. He stuck to that's what we do, stuck to it, and he brought it a lot, and it really unsettled Darnold last week. But just to go back to the offense for 1 second, So you have a situation where Jimmy G, no Puka, no Cup, is out there putting up more points than you have since the Bills game in
Yeah.
3 weeks.
And the
So
most passing yards by a Rams quarterback this season with 333.
barf. That is a big barf. That's terrible. I did not know that stat. But it just makes you there is a problem there. There is absolutely a problem there that should not have occurred with Jimmy G. There were a lot of dumps. There were a lot of dump
Tons.
offs.
I think his average distance.
That inflated his stats that were essentially screens behind the line of scrimmage that count as passing yards, and that's just how that is how Seattle was defending us. They were like, go for it downfield. You're screwed if you go for it, but you can dump it off and get 10, and then we'll stop you in the red zone. But it does make me worried that McVay is calling more too many of the plays. I would like a situation where him and LaFleur, it's not a 50-50, but it's more of like a 70-30, 65, 40, or 35 situation. Because we know that in that Super Bowl run, he leaned on Kevin O'Connell. Sean McVay leaned on Kevin O'Connell quite a bit and called some of the biggest plays in the biggest moments. And I know all that stuff is behind doors and lock and key, but if one day I would love to know the breakdown of how much McVay, lets them hop in a situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a collaborative effort would be exactly what you need. And that's why you have these kind of people in the building to scheme up a game plan in January, especially guys like the LaFleurs who can scheme up a run game really well and can scheme up a short passing game really well with the inexperience at quarterback that they've had historically. You got a young Jordan Love and a Malik Willis in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur, and he's able to scheme up solid game plans consistently week to week. You saw Mike LaFleur back in New York with Zach Wilson be able to scheme up some pretty decent game plans to be able to kind of get him in rhythm, get the quarterback in rhythm, get him going. So yeah, you just lean on each other a little bit more. Have a brotherly type of relationship. We know how close the McVays and the LaFleurs are. Collaborate and make sure that the game plan, especially in the red zone, is as good as it possibly can be come playoff time. And I think this one is going to be really interesting, right? Because this past game was kind of, I don't know if this is the way that every Rams fan wanted it to unfold. I think a lot of Rams fans wanted to host the Commanders, but then they watched the Vikings play the Lions last night against a banged up Lions defense. Granted, they had Anzalone come back, but I think people realized, I think Minnesota might be the matchup that McVay was seeking, especially if you take into consideration you could be playing Washington or potentially Tampa Bay in the following round. So, it's just something to keep in mind. But when you see all this kind of stuff shake out, and Nick, the line is actually really interesting because it opened at -2.5 in favor of the Vikings, and 34% of the money is on the Vikings money line, but the spread actually dipped to 1.5 in favor of the Vikings still. So Rams are +1.5 as a home dog. They're +102 if you want them on the money line. But the money seems like it's going in favor of the Vikings, but the spread still moved in favor of the Rams. So I wanted your opinion on that too.
I think they wanted to entice people to take the Rams, to be honest with you. But you would think the way that they would do that would make them more money on the Rams, make the money line heavier and nicer than +102. I mean, Vegas is saying this is a coin flip game. That is what that line says. I don't care where the money is. The public has been doing well this year, so following the money doesn't always work. But the professionals are saying we don't really know what's going to happen in this game. We kind of think Minnesota's going to win, but Rams at home, they're going to be rested. They are more rested than Minnesota is. And yeah, Jarrett Verse, last time he played the Vikings at home, was able to do the skull chant. So hopefully that's where we're at again, and we can go in there and win this game. And I think there's there's better than a real chance that we're going to win. I think we're just going to straight up win. And then you can make some noise after that, and then worry about it from week to week. Sean McVay is on them. What is this, Dean? Read this for me.
This is about how Brett Coleman was talking about yesterday. In the last 2 seasons combined, Brian Flores' defense has only allowed 30 points just 7 times. Ben Johnson is responsible for 4 of them. So 2 of the Vikings' losses this season were to the Lions, and the other one is to the Rams. And Sean McVay is one of the 7 teams who Brian Flores' defense has allowed 30 points against in the past 2 years. It's really interesting the way that this is going to unfold, because the Vikings swept the Packers. They swept the Bears. The Rams lost to the Packers. They lost to the Bears. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how this all kind of shakes out. But there's something about Sean McVay at home against a team that he has confidence in, that he specifically said, I'm going to rest the starters in hopes that we get this team coming to our house. So it does leave me some faith. It also reminds me of the 2021 season where the Rams had to play a home wild card game, and they hosted the Arizona Cardinals. And if you remember the last time that the Rams played a Monday night playoff game, it was the beginning of the 2021 Super Bowl run, where Kyler didn't know what the hell he was doing, where the hell he was, and the Rams won 34-11, one of the most armchair playoff games in Rams history, and it was Matthew Stafford's first playoff win. So that was a big monkey off his back too. So the stress, I was more stressed out from that game than I was, I think, the following 2 games, because if they lost that one, everyone would be talking nonstop about how the trade was detrimental to the organization and Matthew Stafford is a terrible player and blah, blah, blah. The media would have taken it and ran with it. Instead, the narrative changed in favor of the Rams, which was refreshing.
Absolutely. Also, that game, that Monday night game, gave birth to my favorite clip from a announcer perspective. You have Eli and Peyton and The Rock. And The Rock is like speaking to Kyler, who obviously can't hear him, but was like, this is when you got to rally all your boys, get them all together, let them know, hey, man, it's not over. And this is when you're going to bring it. And then he like evades a sack, but throws up this like lollipop, and then it's caught and it's a touchdown the other way. And then you have The Rock go, I guess I'll have to drink Terramana for that. And he takes like
I think it was Traven Howard that forced that fumble. Or caught the interception and brought it in. So I mean that's
why are we the Monday night team, though?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Why are we the Monday night team?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The Texans are the Saturday day early morning game.
Yeah.
Every year it seems, and we're the Monday night team now. This is the 3rd year that this happened, and we're two of the 3 times it's a Rams game.
I don't know. I have no specific explanation besides that the Vikings and the Lions was the season finale, so they're trying to give maybe the Vikings some extra rest. But I can't. I don't know exactly why, but that's what I would assume. And it came out during the time of the game, came out during the Lions and Vikings game. So, and this was also what happened after the fact. And I thought that this is the real life NFL version of The Rock, is Dan Campbell, where the Lions clinched the #1 seed for the first time in team history, and most wins, 15 in team history in a single season, which the Lions are the best team in the league this year. So it's nice to see them get the 1 seed, but I would love to see them later on in the playoffs. But Dan Campbell said to Kevin O'Connell, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, I take that personally.
I can see why Rams fans will feel that way and try to use that. And yeah, I see people like, use this as fodder in the locker room after you beat the Vikings. First of all, beat the Vikings. Second of all, that is a nice thing for a coach in a division to say to another coach in the division, like, you guys are a hell of a team.
Yeah.
You know, like, I really don't think he was thinking about the Rams there at all. I think it was just like
he wasn't. It was
just like a, hey, man,
hear that and be like, oh, okay, you think that's
like,
a shoe?
You made it to the dance. I made it to the dance. We have a bye. Maybe we'll see you down the stretch. That's kind of all I took away from it. I get the idea of where Rams fans are coming from, but I just didn't feel it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say that, and we're going to jump into a deep dive with the Vikings later on this week, but I'm just going to say a couple of things. The quarterback play for the Vikings is a concern in terms of them, the Vikings fans. It's a concern for the Vikings. I think the running game is also a concern. Aaron Jones has been banged up for weeks. I think the secondary is aging. I think the defensive line has one true, real pass rusher in Van Ginkel. Brian Flores schemes up a hell of a defense. And they also have a really, really bad kicker. I can't even remember the name of their kicker, Will something, but he just has a hate the face. And you look at our kicker, and he's got to love the face. Joshua Karty is It looks like he's going to be the future at the kicker position. He had a 58-yarder and a 57-yarder. The 58-yarder looked like it could have been good from 63, 64, 65. And his career long at Stanford was 61. It looks like he has the leg, and I think it's looking more and more like the Rams have a real kicker. And it's nice to have that in time for the playoffs, to have confidence in your kicker, to have confidence in your special teams, in Jordan Whittington to be able to win in all three phases. Looks like the defense is going to show up. This defense specifically with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and guys like Cameron Kinchins and Jalen McCullough, Darius Williams and Quentin Lake and Cam Curl. A lot of these guys are younger. Some of these guys are veterans. Even Omar Spates, like the rookie class is phenomenal. And I think they're just building towards the right type of identity, which is that, that hard-nosed, young, fast, going to be in your face and talk shit constantly all game type of defense. And you love to have that in the playoffs. The one piece that we talked about in the beginning of this episode is the explosives on offense. So, you get McVay and LaFleur starting to work a little bit more collaboratively together. You get some of the screen games, the short dump offs, get your quarterback in rhythm, and then you take your shots, your well-timed explosives. You're particularly good in the red zone. You're still implementing play action. You're implementing mesh concepts in the red zone to be able to keep defenses on their heels. That to me is where the confidence is going to lie. So all three phases need to play well. We talked about this weeks and weeks and weeks as we prepare for games, but it feels like with special teams playing as well as they are, the defense playing really well in the last couple of weeks, and now just the offense has the ability. We know they have the ability, so that's why they're the team no one wants to play.
Yeah, that's the mentality of us. You got to use that, steal some souls, to take some words from Matthew Stafford during the 2021 run. It does feel like, they're using that to their advantage. It's like people know that this is the coach and quarterback combo, the only one in the NFC that has gotten the job done right now. Mm-hmm. So use that and bring it on. And also, just to go back on Karty, amazing. He is responsible for two huge wins this season, the 49ers game and the 49ers game. Those are those are the two. He hates the 49ers, and so I love him.
And he grew up, the best part is he grew up a Niners fan at Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, he probably wants to beat them more than for that exact reason. But yeah, just shout out to Karty, man.
Yeah, to get it at this time, I think is really important. So I just want to say thanks to everybody. We appreciate you guys listening. As always, go Rams. We're going to do another deep dive, really detailed dive into the Vikings, just looking at the last 5-6 weeks, looking since the Rams played the Vikings all the way back in week 6 or whatever it was on Thursday Night Football. But we do have the utmost confidence in this team. Optimism, pessimism, it's fine. We bring it together, we collaborate, and we try to call a good game. So we appreciate you guys. And make sure before we sign off, make sure to just remind everybody too. Ram it. Like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys. Go Rams. Peace.
Go Rams.